Software teams are trying to build capabilities that help their part of the business win. And what we hear from people all the time is, how do I go faster? How do I get value that the business wants to them quicker? And what we see organizations doing is looking across the process of ideation and planning what to do, designing solutions, coding it up, then moving through the build, deploy, test, release process, and looking for opportunities along that path to improve. And bringing that automation together, bringing a lot of the better collaboration together, that's really what we see in DevOps. So let's look at a case study to see how this really comes together. This case study from NBC Universal and IBM is one of my favorites. And it really shows how you can work on a couple different elements of DevOps and deliver something nice and successful. So this is a lengthy case study, and there's a ton of really good content in here. But there are just a couple of things that I really want to focus in on. So, first, when we look here, what we see is that the biggest, most obvious bottleneck for the project called Compass was the regression testing suite that took 6 to 8 weeks of time. And that was because they had a huge test suite with 1,000 test cases. What'd they do to fix it? Well, they paralyzed the test execution, and instead of running it one at a time on one machine, they ran 20 at a time across 50 machines. So they're running all of these things at once using 50 test machines. The outcome of this is they went from 6 to 8 weeks down to 3 hours to run a regression test. And that's a really huge win, right? We like that. And it's powerful because you can say that the regression testing is shorter, but it also means that when you find a regression error and you go back to development with it, that was something they worked on yesterday and is fresh in their mind, rather than being something that they worked on a couple of months ago and they have to try to remember what they did, right? So really powerful from just kind of the mechanics of the testing, but also what it does for everybody else in the organization. So very cool approach. They use some cloud resources from the SkyTap capability offered on IBM Cloud to spin up 50 test machines, run all these tests, spin them back down. Very cool. Now, the other thing that was really important here that got wrapped in this is they took this Compass app, a big .NET app, and they used UrbanCode for the build and deployment capability, right? So instead of manual builds and deployments by hand, which would sometimes be wrong and mess up some of that regression suite, everything would just flow, right? You commit to source control, builds automatically happen, deployments happen on a schedule. They trigger the provisioning and the execution of the test suite all automatically. And the power of this is that they went from 20 weeks to get a release out down to 5 weeks. And now they're able to drive that down, and they're close to 2 weeks. That's fantastic. So if we look at the perspective we used earlier and we apply it to the Compass scenario, we do see that in that test area, that was a really big win, moving from a couple of months to 3 hours. But that wasn't just a situation where we have 20 weeks, we subtract off 8, and we're at 13 weeks. No. They got down to 5, and they're on their way to 2. They did that by wrapping that in the rest of the automation that surrounded testing, making sure that they didn't have to wait for a release window to ship. They automated the build, deploy, and connected that to the testing scenario. And all of that drove better feedback to developers so they were able to be more efficient and get more done. All of these things multiply together to drive down that time from 20 weeks to 5, a 75% improvement, and now towards 2 weeks, a 90% improvement. From the perspective of the tools that were involved here, we mentioned UrbanCode, build and deploy, used in that build, deploy, release cycle. And the star of the show for driving down the testing time was that SkyTap capability. I hope this case study in looking at the interplay between a lot of pieces and parts in a DevOps cycle and how they can impact each other and have a profound impact on time to market and how quickly you can deliver for the business has been helpful to you. Thank you.